Hi, this summer I'll be preaching from the Old Testament readings from the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And that book tells the story of three people, Samuel the prophet, and the first two kings of Israel who Samuel anoints, King Saul and King David. And you'll hear the highlights of this big story on Sunday, but the Revised Common Lectionary skips a lot in between. So every week for the next couple months, I'm going to pick something from that is in between the Sunday's readings to share here on Wednesday or Thursday. So this week, the Sunday story is Samuel's call, and that comes from 1 Samuel chapter 3. But before that, there is the story of Samuel's birth and the story of the priest Eli and his two sons. So today I'm going to talk about Samuel's birth. So reading from 1 Samuel chapter 1. Now there was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Suphite from the highlands of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah. He was from the tribe of Ephraim, and he was the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph. Elkanah had two wives, one named Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah didn't. So I'm going to stop here, because this is a really common trope in the Bible, where there is a barren woman, especially when there are two wives sometimes, one who has lots of children and one wife who doesn't. So for example, there's Sarah and Hagar, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, all in Genesis. There's also in the book of Judges, Samson's mother. And in the New Testament, Elizabeth and Zechariah are old and have no children. So there's three parts to this trope. Usually the report of barrenness, so the man and his wife have no children. And then there is the promise of the birth by a divine messenger, so an angel or an oracle speaking to one of the parents, announcing the birth. And then finally the child is born, and that child is going to be very important. So returning to 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 3. Every year this man would leave his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of heavenly forces in Shiloh, where Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were the Lord's priests. Whenever he sacrificed, Elkanah would give parts of the sacrifice to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But he would give only one part of it to Hannah, though he loved her, because the Lord had kept her from conceiving. And because the Lord had kept Hannah from conceiving, her rival would make fun of her mercilessly just to bother her. So that is what took place year after year. Whenever Hannah went to the Lord's house, Peninnah would make fun of her. Then she would cry and wouldn't eat anything. "Hannah, why aren't you crying?" her husband Elkanah would say to her. "Why won't you eat? Why are you so sad? Aren't I worth more to you than 10 sons?" One time, after eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah got up and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting in the chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Hannah was very upset and couldn't stop crying as she prayed to the Lord. Then she made this promise: "Lord of heavenly forces, just look at your servant's pain and remember me. Don't forget your servant. Give her a boy, then I'll give him to the Lord for his entire life, and no razor will ever touch his head." I'm going to stop here again. So this dedicating a child to God, and she says no razor will ever touch his head. And this is referring to something called a Nazirite vow. So Hannah's promising that her child, should she have one, will be a Nazirite. And in Numbers chapter 6, Nazirite vows are described, and a Nazirite is someone, male or female, who has dedicated themselves to God, and there are three main things. First, a prohibition on cutting hair, and then second, they abstain from wine and other intoxicants, And thirdly, they are supposed to stay away from dead bodies. And that's a matter of touching a dead body is the worst kind of ritual impurity. So as it's described in Numbers, this is a voluntary thing and it's for a specific period of time. So like 2 years or whatever. You won't cut your hair and you won't have wine. But there's another story in Judges of another child who's dedicated as a Nazirite from before birth, and that's the story of Samson. And I mentioned Samson as another case of a barren woman being told that she will have a very special child. And she's told to abstain from alcohol while pregnant because the child she's carrying is to be a Nazirite. So, returning to the text. Verse 12. As she kept praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart, her lips were moving, but her voice was silent, so Eli thought she was drunk. How long will you act like a drunk? Sober up, Eli told her. No, sir, Hannah replied. I'm just a very sad woman. I haven't had any wine or beer, but I have been pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think your servant is some good-for-nothing woman. This whole time I've been praying out of my great worry and trouble. And Eli responded, Then go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you've asked from him. Please think well of me, your servant, Hannah said. Then the woman went on her way, ate some food, and wasn't sad any longer. They got up early the next morning and worshipped the Lord. Then they went back home to Ramah. Elkanah had sex with his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, which means, I asked the Lord for him. So there's the Annunciation story of Samuel. But it's a little bit different than the normal Annunciation story, because Hannah doesn't get a direct response from God. Instead, she's praying to God. And then the priest Eli, who speaks to her as God's messenger, gets everything wrong. First, he accuses her of being drunk, and that's right after she's promised God that her child won't ever drink. And then second, he doesn't know the content of her prayer when he says, May God answer your prayer. So this is a little different take on that Annunciation story to a barren woman. And if you keep reading further into chapter 2, Eli is not really a great priest, nor is he a great father. His sons are a whole lot of trouble. And the story continues. So, after Samuel's birth. When Elkanah and all his household went up to make the annual sacrifice and keep his solemn promise, Hannah didn't go. I'll bring the boy when he is weaned, she told her husband, so he can be presented to the Lord and stay there permanently. I will offer him as a Nazirite forever. Do what seems best to you, said her husband Elkanah. Stay here until you've weaned him, but may the Lord bring to pass what you've promised. So the woman stayed home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. When he had been weaned and was still very young, Hannah took him along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a jar of wine, and brought them to the Lord's house at Shiloh. They slaughtered the bull, then brought the boy to Eli. Excuse me, sir, Hannah said. As surely as you live, sir, I am the woman who stood here next to you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this boy, and the Lord gave me what I asked from him. So now I give this boy back to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is given to the Lord. Then they worshipped there before the Lord. And Hannah prayed. Now we come to Hannah's song, or Hannah's prayer. And it might have some familiar themes to you, and that's because the Magnificat, Mary's song that she sings when she meets with pregnant Elizabeth in the Gospel of Luke, is based on Hannah's song. So On Sunday, we're going to sing my favorite not Christmassy version of the Magnificat, the Canticle of Turning. And this song of Hannah that the Magnificat is based on is a lens to view all of 1st and 2nd Samuel with. And this song that Hannah sings or prays when Samuel is given to God, dedicated to God, forms kind of a bookend with to the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, with David's last words in 2nd Samuel chapter 22. This song and Mary's song talk about reversals of fortune. They praise God for taking the wealthy and arrogant down a notch and raising up the poor and filling the hungry with good things. And I'll put a link to a musical version of Hannah's prayer in the comments. My heart rejoices. So Hannah prayed. My heart rejoices in the Lord. My strength rises up in the Lord. My mouth mocks my enemies because I rejoice in your deliverance. No one is holy like the Lord. No one except you. There is no rock like our God. Don't go on and on talking so proudly, spouting arrogance from your mouth, because the Lord is the God who knows, and he weighs every act. The bows of mighty warriors are shattered, but those who are stumbling now dress themselves in power. Those who are full now sell themselves for bread, but the ones who are starving are now fat from food. The woman who was bearing has birthed 7 children, but the mother with many sons has lost them all. The Lord, he brings death, gives life, takes down to the grave, and raises up. The Lord, he makes poor, gives wealth, brings low, but also lifts up high. God raises the poor from the dust, lifts up the needy from the garbage pile. God sits with them with officials, gives them the seat of honor. The pillars of the earth belong to the Lord. He set the world on top of them. God guards the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked will die in darkness because no one succeeds by strength alone. The Lord, his enemies are terrified. God thunders against them from heaven. The Lord, he judges the far corners of the earth. May God give strength to his king and raise high the strength of his anointed one. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy served the Lord under Eli the priest. And then there's a little bit about Eli's sons, and you can read that on your own. And they're contrasted with Samuel growing up in God's presence, just as Hannah promised. Chapter 2, verse 18. Now Samuel was serving the Lord. He was a young boy, clothed in a linen priestly vest. His mother would make a small robe for him and take it to him every year when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife. May the Lord replace the child of this woman that you gave back to the Lord. Then they would return home. And the Lord paid attention to Hannah, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the Lord's service. This is the word of the Lord. So check out Hannah's prayer set to music and the rest of 1 Samuel chapter 2, and I'll see you on Sunday for the 3rd chapter.